Welcome to Does It Matter? I'm Kareem. Now, there's been something that bugs me for a fair while in terms of some of the aspects of fighting on film and in TV shows, much of which is done splendidly and with a certain degree of realism. We all accept to some degree that there's going to be an element of fantasy. We have superheroes and superpowers, which tend to explain and cover the plausibility issues with some of the things they do. We have shows like Game of Thrones, which are inherently very realistic for the most part. There's always elements of, again, fantasy and fiction that creep in, exaggeration and so on. And we accept that. We take with a pinch of salt that there are certain things that make their way into our fiction to leaven them, to spice them up a little bit. And we all accept that, you know. But there are certain things, like the reality of even a very well-trained person beating multiple trained people, which happens over and over again in film. It's a much more problematic thing in real life. Much more problematic. People being knocked out, recovering, and then going on to save the day. You know, running, fighting, so on and so on. Incredibly problematic, so unrealistic it's not funny, and that's probably where we'll start. There are a number of different tropes that I want to work through, but that's the one that I want to start with. I've worked for over 30 years in security, crowd control predominantly. Okay, I've had hundreds of altercations, fights and struggles with people, including many groups. I understand the mechanics of how people fight in groups. I understand how street fights tend to work, the psychology and the physics involved. I mean, intimately experienced in such a thing. I've also had over 20 kickboxing fights, dozens of karate fights, both contact and non-contact, some judo competitions, some grappling competitions. So I'm a reasonably cognizant martial artist. I have a reasonable awareness of where and how those things work. What I do know is that when someone gets knocked out, they're rarely ever good when they wake up. They're not running 100 meters. They're not doing a Mission Impossible leap onto a tram. They're not suddenly fighting off 3 attackers and escaping from the prison base. They're not. They're usually nauseous, they're feeling ill, and they're very wobbly and weak, sometimes for hours. And that's from a very quick flash knockout where they've only been out for a few seconds. Okay? If that person's been lying there for minutes or longer and they wake up, it will be the hardest thing they've done in the world just to get up. Just to stand up and get back to their feet will be a dangerous and difficult thing for them to do, let alone continuing along a cinema trope or a TV show plot line. It's not going to happen. It just isn't. And to me, it's an incredibly dangerous trope because the numbers of people I've talked to who really do firmly seem to believe that you can be knocked out and be okay. Yes, that does happen. I train kickboxers, I train MMA fighters, and I was one myself. So I understand that yes, you can get a flash knockout and get up and be fine a few seconds later. But you can also not be fine, which is when that tends to happen, we tend to stop sparring. That person stops sparring. And if they suffer any headaches or any other signs of concussion, they're off to the doctors. It's that simple. And they won't be sparring for many weeks. The brain is too important for that. So, realistically speaking, people are going around with an idea in their head that is disproportionate, vastly removed from the reality. You can't knock someone out and not have consequences, not some very dire consequences. The one-punch deaths that we've had recently here in Australia are a good example of that, of people thinking, oh, I'm going to knock him out, I can do it easy. Boom, yeah, you can. You can do it easy. But he's not going to get up and be okay afterwards. He won't be commiserating with his friends over a black eye. He might, but he might not. There's a very good chance he's going to be at home sick for days, off work, costing the community, costing his family and his life, all right, feeling like dog shit because he probably doesn't even know why you hit him. And then he could be worse. He could suffer a brain bleed. He could die. And that happens frequently enough that I suspect that to some degree, cinema and TV are responsible for conveying the idea that people get knocked out all the time, it's okay. No, they don't, and they're not okay. Please don't do it. If you knock someone out, do it deliberately with a firm understanding of the fact that you could be in the position of taking that person's life or altering their quality of life for a long time, possibly permanently. You could put that person in a wheelchair in the Julia Farr Centre for the brain injured. You could do all manner of things to them. You could just cause them to have a nervous breakdown and commit suicide. You don't know where that person's at. You don't know what their psychological and physiological state is. You don't know what medication they're on. Hitting people is a big deal. And it should be avoided as vehemently as possible. You should try to avoid physical contact. My attitude is this: you want to fight? Get paid. Get paid. At least become an amateur and work to getting paid. Okay? Get into a fight. Get a trophy. Work according to rules. Train hard. Be disciplined. Be a professional. Okay? That's the key here. Not running around in the streets hitting people that are as ignorant as you are about how to actually defend themselves. There's no lucre in that. There's no benefit in that for anyone. And all it does is line you up for a trip to a maximum security prison for a very long time. And a lot of lives ruined in the process. Please don't hit people in the head unless you absolutely have to. Cheers, and thanks for that one. Now, the next one. Fighting multiple people. I've fought multiple people many times. I wish I hadn't, but I did. Okay? One of the things I learned from it was it's horrible. It's not nice. I was afraid the whole time. I was angry the whole time because those people were trying to hurt me and I didn't want to be there. But I did what I had to do. And in some cases, yes, I've smashed groups of people because they didn't know how to fight. And I was fighting all the time. I was having multiple fights at work. I was having kickboxing fights every few months. I was constantly sparring with animals, with savages who were fighting more than me. So it wasn't fair. It wasn't a fair fight. They were never fair fights, even when there were large groups. And generally, most of the time, especially as I got older and better, the people I fought fared very poorly, even in groups. They were just skittles to the bowling ball. Fighting trained people, that's an entirely different kettle of fish. I have sparred reasonably hard with 2 and 3 people. It's very hard. And had we been going full contact, okay, I think considering the circumstances, sometimes I might have done quite well, but I would have been badly hurt in the process. There's no doubt about it. I would have been sporting some serious injuries as a result. These people were landing shots on me that, had there been full power, would have caused damage. And there's a reasonable chance I would have just got the shit beaten out of me. It does happen. I could beat any one of the 3 people I've sparred a few times, but I couldn't beat all 3 of them. Not easily anyway, and certainly not without taking a lot of damage myself. And they were nearly always smaller than me because I'm a fairly big guy. I'm 6 foot, I'm about 110 kilos, so I'm bigger than most people. But if I was fighting even 3 guys my size, 3 other heavyweights, I don't think that's going to go well for me. I might drop one, maybe hurt a second one, and then I'm going to be out. I'm going to be gone. That's the reality of it. I fought at a state and national level as a kickboxer. I fought with world champions and sparred with world champions. I know that my standard is very high, and I'm a big guy, and I've trained all my life since I was 17 without any breaks. So I feel confident in saying that the reality of stage fighting and movie fighting is generally vastly in exaggeration of what's possible in real life. And it can convey some ideas. Sorry about this, my phone is moving. Sorry about that. It can convey ideas that are just broadly and in detailed fashion wrong. For putting it simply, they're wrong. It doesn't work that way. Avoid fights with groups. As I said before, avoid punching people in the head if you can. Avoid knocking people out if you can, at all costs if you can. And avoid fights with groups even more than that. Fights with groups are very dangerous for a variety of reasons. And fighting with a group of people who are fit and athletic and might have a clue as to how to fight is a recipe for a trip to the emergency ward. Absolutely, 100%. Even if you hurt them, Even if by some miracle of ferocity and skill you manage to beat them, you're going to hospital with them. And you may be fronting up in court with them if someone's seriously ill or perishes. So keep in mind that fighting is complexity in motion. It is kinetic poetry with pain and damage associated with it at an extreme level. You don't want to hit people unless you have to. You don't want to fight groups unless you have to. And you want to find ways of mitigating those situations if you have to. I.e., if you're going to hit someone, but if you can grapple them, if you can choke them, much better. If you can control them or strike them somewhere else to cause pain, enabling you to grapple them and control them. I love doing that. It's really effective, and I rarely have to hurt them too much anyway. In terms of groups, physical awareness, environmental awareness. Before you go into a situation, pass it out, suss it out. Who's here? What are they doing? Who looks aggressive? Who doesn't? Okay? People call that sometimes, I've had people accuse me of being hypervigilant. I don't think that's hypervigilance at all. I think that's vigilance that we've lost in our snowflake, soft, borderline narcissistic society. We're so concerned with ourselves and our pleasure that we forget we have a responsibility to ourselves and to each other, safety-wise. You have a responsibility as well as a right. Your responsibility is to yourself and to the people with you to keep each other safe. So do that. Even when you're having fun, that doesn't abnegate your responsibility to be safe. It seems to be a forgotten skill. Walk into a room, walk into a place, suss it out. Don't start hammering those drinks down until you know that you're safe. I don't drink in public as a general rule. I don't really drink at all anyway. But even when I did drink, I didn't drink in public. I'd have a drink or two at the very most occasionally, because it's not generally safe to drink and to debilitate yourself when you're surrounded by people. If you're going to do it, at the very least, be cognizant of your environment. Be aware of who's there and who they might be. Pay attention. It's part of the whole mindfulness gig. All right? Don't walk around in a dream. As a martial artist, it's second nature to pay attention to the people around me. It's second nature to pay attention to my environment, to know where the exits are, to know the condition of the floor. Is it slippery? Is it grippy? And a lot of that reflects in the clothing I wear and the footwear that I have on, and so on and so on. Pay attention to those details. You know, is there security there? Are they paying attention, or are they busy chatting to the girls? You know, is everyone doing their job? What's the bar like? What's the feeling like? Get a feel for the place. Breathe the air. Suss it out. You can get an awful lot of micro cues and subtle information by just openly opening up the broadband, the human Wi-Fi, and paying attention to everything that's going on around you, using all your senses. It's an excellent skill. It's quite satisfying. You'll learn a lot, but more importantly, you'll be safer. You'll pick things up. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. 90% of self-defense isn't fighting, but actually being aware of your environment. The hunter skills that our ancestors had for the better part of the last 2 million years. Hunting, paying attention to the environment, foraging for food. These things require an intimate understanding of our environment. We are rapidly losing that in our culture, our pleasure-rich, easy access culture. And again, if you're interested in improving that, nothing better than martial arts. Going trekking, hiking, things like that, staying close to nature, excellent ways of doing it as well. But to really refine it, I would always suggest a component of martial arts training. Being aware of people, looking at people, picking up micro cues from people, smells, looks, posture, body language. These things are vital for understanding where you are and what you're doing, okay? And that will prevent you from ending up in a fight with 3, 4, 5 people. Recognizing when people are sussing you out. Recognizing when you're being framed or bracketed by a group that intends to provoke a fight, which happens an awful lot. And leaving the situation, getting out. Just going, this is not a safe place to be. I'm going to go somewhere that's safer. Or I'm going to go home. Whatever your choice might be. Fighting lots of people ain't a good idea. Fighting anyone outside of a cage or a ring in a sanctioned fight is a bad idea. Okay? Fighting and sparring also, and that's for the next podcast, two different things. Sparring and fighting are two entirely different things, but I'll cover that in the next podcast. Thanks for listening to me rant, and there'll be plenty more down the pipe. Cheers.